There's a moment that catches a lot of leaders off guard, happened to me many times, and it usually happens in a meeting that otherwise should feel normal. You walk in, you take your seat, and nothing on the agenda necessarily changes, but the room shifts. People slow down, ideas come out more carefully. There's a reluctance, a resistance, a kind of uncertainty that creeps into the space. Decisions start floating toward you, even if you didn't ask for that. And what I mean by decisions floating towards, that people start waiting for us for decisions. And later you're left with this quiet question. I'm not trying to control this environment. So why does it feel like everyone and everything waits on me? What makes this moment confusing is that nothing looks wrong on the surface. No one pushes back. No one seems disengaged completely anyways. In fact, it can look like respect. But internally, leaders start noticing that the team isn't moving with the same confidence, speed when they're present. And that disconnect is hard to explain without sounding defensive or self-critical.
And this is usually the point when leaders start asking the wrong questions, which, to be fair, we ask the wrong questions all the time as human beings. But instead of looking at what they might be contributing to the situation, how their presence might be shaping the situation, we know, Eric, what does everybody default to? What's wrong with them?
Yep.
What's wrong with my team? And we see that time and time again. So how do we help leaders begin to tell the difference between a capacity issue on the team and maybe a pattern that their own presence is creating, right? Like, is it a team problem, or is it something I'm doing? Help us understand the difference, Eric.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think most leaders interpret the hesitation in the space, the reluctance to share ideas, as a problem with their people, right? They assume the team needs more confidence, more clarity, more competence, more experience. And so we can begin to respond by trying to be more available, more responsive, more involved. And the irony is that oftentimes those instincts usually come from care, not control. But what's actually happening has less to do with the intention and more to do with the environment that we may inadvertently be creating.
Yep.
Teams are constantly reading where certainty lives, right? We want to feel secure as human beings. We want to feel like we're not doing something wrong. Everything's going to be okay. And so oftentimes we don't realize our teams are paying attention to whose opinion ultimately matters in the room.
Yeah,
and whose ideas tend to get, revised, refined, and or replaced. And more often than not, what we don't realize as leaders is that people are looking to us to make all of those decisions.
Yeah,
You were going to say something.
I was just going to ask, unpack that idea for us a little bit. What do we mean by people inadvertently are looking for where certainty lives? How does that show up? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think, I've seen this so many times with teams I've led or working with other leaders with their teams is, we as human beings have a natural kind of self-protection against looking stupid, not having great ideas, looking incompetent. We don't want to throw out an idea that everyone's like, oh, that's terrible, right? So brainstorming sessions, really everybody's just kind of waiting around for, hey, leader, we know you have great ideas. We're going to play at this whole brainstorming or problem solving game. Because what we're waiting for is for you to make the final call, you to bring the verdict, you to make the decision, you to share the accurate or right, the correct perspective or solution. And I think what that does, without us even realizing it, is as leaders, we play into that, right? Because we want to help them. We want to serve them. We want to leverage our experience, our intelligence, our wisdom in those spaces. But by doing that, it's really no different than with our kids. If we constantly solve their problems, if we constantly do their chores, things that they're struggling with, then what's the default become? Well, mom or dad will just step in and take care of it. Mm-hmm. Right. My wife would tell you, and anybody listening today, that I, as her husband, am wildly guilty of that. right? I do something around the house. It's not done to the standard she wants. She lets me know. And I say, babe, I don't know. Why don't you just do it? Part of that is maybe just me not taking responsibility, but part of it is I don't want to appear incompetent, foolish, stupid. And so I will withdraw from that environment and just default to the highest authority in any situation. Say, you're the smart person, you're the authority. Why don't you just do this for us?
Yeah, and I think there's something too that as humans, we want to be on the winning team.
Yeah.
So we don't want to put our neck out and come up with an idea that our leader ultimately doesn't pick as the winning idea. And now we in front of all our peers have been grouped with the losing idea, you know?
That's right. That's right.
So it's safer to just wait and get a sense of where the leader's going. Now I can, self-protect and just jump on the bandwagon ahead of time as early as
Oh,
possible.
I saw this recently. We work with a variety of professional sports organizations, and I was working with this individual who's part of the scouting team, right? So their job is to go out and watch players in their respective sport at the collegiate level with the intention of rating them and determining, hey, is this person worth, drafting or bringing into our program? And this particular scout was sharing with me that when they are together with the rest of the scouting team, the last thing they want to do is promote a player if other scouts don't agree with them, right?
Pick a loser.
For that same reason, because man, if I stick my neck out and I'm promoting this player and I think they should be a high draft pick, but the rest of the team says, not good, then how does that reflect on that individual as a scout? Am I not a good scout? Do I not have the right interpretive lenses to determine these things? Am I making mistakes? Am I valuable to the scouting department if I'm not in agreement with everybody else? But here's what happens. Here's what I had to let this scout know. I've spoken with some of the other scouts. Guess what? They all feel the same way.
Right.
So now everybody's hedging their bets, concerned about, bringing a really strong opinion to the space for fear of being on the losing team, as you said, looking incompetent and undercutting the value that they appeared value that they bring. But here's what I know as a leader. And I can speak to the leader of this scouting team because it drives them nuts. They're like, your job isn't to make the final decision, but your job is to bring the clearest, most accurate view that you have of the players in question. And so it doesn't matter if you disagree with other scouts, because at the end of the day, you're not responsible for making the ultimate decision. But if we don't have the best of what all these different scouts are bringing to the table, and everybody is skewing their perspective, right, to try and be on the winning team, then really we're not getting the best input from those scouts so that we as leaders can ultimately make the best decisions. And I think that's what we're uncovering with a lot of the leaders we work with. It doesn't just happen in that industry. It happens in every industry when we bring a team together to brainstorm, problem solve, negotiate challenges. And as a leader, sometimes we're not aware of the environment that we're creating and inadvertently maybe creating a culture in that space where people really don't feel safe to bring their opinions, or they are just kind of hedging their bets, waiting for the leader to ultimately give their perspective.
Yeah. And there's so many directions that we could take that, because so many things are at play in that scenario. One is, how does your team deal with failure? Or how do you as a leader deal with failure when it happens on your team? What is the environment around brainstorming and harnessing the collective genius? There's so many nuances that as leaders we need to be paying attention to in that environment. But today I want to continue to focus us in on how do we as leaders reframe this then? What's the mental shift we need to make? Because we're not doing it on purpose, right? But like we tell our leaders all the time, hey, when you can't change what you can't see. So if suddenly you become aware that your presence has been creating a difficult environment or a less than ideal environment for your team, wonderful.
Yeah.
You don't need to beat yourself up over it. It's an invitation
That's right.
to do things differently. So what's the invitation here? What's the shift that leaders can make?
Yeah. So I'm going to invite our listeners into kind of reframing the scenario that we all kind of fall prey to. Um, so for most of us, we've not been taught that leadership presence is never neutral.
Yes.
By virtue of our title, our position, our authority, our place in the team or in the company, our presence is never neutral. Whenever we walk into a room, any meeting that we are participating in, our presence is not neutral, right?
Yeah.
People will naturally gravitate and skew toward us because we're the authority. Now, there's a part of that that is healthy and okay and normal and shouldn't be a problem, right? Because there should be a degree of respect and honor and deference
Yes.
given to the leader in the room. And yet, if we're not careful, we're not aware that our presence can have an adverse effect, like we've been talking about, right? We step into the room and all of a sudden everyone's very careful and on pins and needles and afraid to make a mistake and not wanting to, ruin their reputation and on things that we've already discussed, right? So it shapes behavior. Our presence shapes behavior, whether we intend it or not. And especially the more competent and respected a leader is, the more decisive, the more experienced, the more likely that the team will unhealthily default and skew and wait for us to actually, frame the situation and come to a conclusion, right? And at that point, hesitation isn't about permission, it's about gravity. The leader becomes the place where certainty lives. Like everyone just goes, well, they probably know the right answer. I don't want to be on the losing team, right? and then everything starts to orbit in that direction. And this means that empowerment isn't just about what we say and whether we delegate. It's about whether the environment that we're creating actually requires people to think, to take responsibility, to make decisions, to have ownership,
Yeah.
right? Rather than just feeling like they're part of a think tank. And if we're not careful as leaders, we might be inadvertently just creating think tanks. Hey, just give me the best of your ideas. Links. I'll take it from here. Right. And the truth is, creating this environment can be uncomfortable because it shifts the focus away, right, from who we are as a leader and our expertise and toward a team to say, we need to participate in this together. And what's at stake? You said the phrase earlier. It's one of our favorite phrases. When everybody just defaults to our perspective and our decision-making ability, when everyone skews toward us trying to be on the winning team, what we miss out on is the collective genius available in the room. And that, by collective genius, I mean the group's ability together to assess the problem, the challenge, the decision that has to be made, the group's ability to bring different angles and perspectives on whatever we're up against that will illuminate things that we may not have been able to see by ourselves, and the group's ability to together wrestle through what is the right solution and how are we going to move forward on this most effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny that you went there because out of my mouth next was going to be what's at stake here, but you took it right from me. And I want to point this out too. This happens with leaders who are very authoritative, big presences. This also happens with leaders who are like, I love to delegate, that we're a team. It doesn't matter what type of leadership energy that you think you're showing up with. This is probably happening on your teams to some degree. And what you're missing out on is really being able to cultivate the best of the people that you have brought to the room, and you have paid for them to be there because you knew, you had a hunch that they were going to deliver something, provide something for your team. And when we aren't aware that this is happening, we're undercutting that entire process.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I know that even in our team, there have been various meetings where I have to intentionally like say, guys, I need your thoughts. I need your ideas. Disagree with me, disagree with one another. There's no bad idea. There's no stupid idea. Like we're just throwing stuff out. We need the best of what everybody has to offer. And if we don't set that, and we're going to come back to this when we get into, kind of more boots on the ground, what are the practical handles as leaders we can employ to create the desirable environment? We've got to have really clear intention, really clear turn signals, clear expectations of how these meetings will go. Otherwise, more often than not, people will default to just waiting on us to figure it all out.
Yeah. Okay. So as we've already discussed, this is at least to some degree an environmental issue that the leaders are creating, that we as leaders are creating. So let's move into practical handles. What are some things that we can start to do, some internal shifts or external shifts that we can be making to make sure we're not doing this on our teams?
Yeah. So let me give some highline ideas, just kind of as a paradigm shift, and then we'll get down into some practical nuts and bolts ideas. So what do we do so that we're not swinging to different extremes, right? Like one extreme is I might as well just make the decision and call the shots and move on, and my team was useless. Or the other extreme, which is I'm just going to delegate it completely and I have no involvement, right? Yeah. Those are gutters on either side of the road that we want to be in, because the answer isn't just disappearing from the room, saying you guys figure it out, right? But it's also not pretending that you don't have an opinion. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's a tension that gets created for us as leaders in those spaces that we've got to learn to become familiar and comfortable with, right? Yeah. So the moment that we feel, right, that pull, whether it's because of the conversation in the room, because people are drawing from us, right, to give direction, to just solve the problem, to offer our perspective, right, to resist that and to instead see that as a signal to pause instead of just to jump in and start fixing things. Right? To stay in the moment just long enough to notice what's actually happening in the space and the opportunity that is available, right? To ensure that the energy is redirected back into the room to say, we are figuring this out. We are solving this. We together are participating in our future success. We're not just here to listen to my brilliant ideas, which, to be fair, sometimes I do just want my team to listen to my brilliant ideas. That's my struggle. Okay. Right. So let's get down into some practical nuts and bolts because we deal with this all the time. Number one, as leaders, if we don't set the intention that we want to enter that space with, then we are more likely than not to enter in and to fall into the gutters on either side of the road, right? Yeah. We're going to become overly dominant in the conversation to the point where people just feel like, why am I even saying anything? I don't want to participate, or I'm just going to skew so that I'm on the winning team, right? The other temptation is to just not say anything and withdraw or not even participate and say, I don't want to oversway anything, right? Yeah. So we know those temptations. So the first thing as a leader is to say, I want to set my intention that whatever it is that we are having to discuss as a team, that my core responsibility in this meeting is to empower them. Mm-hmm. That's my intention, to empower them, to create opportunity for them to participate, right? So to say, I want to make sure we harness the collective genius in this room. It's not about me I may have the responsibility to make the final decision, but I want that final decision to be founded in the perspective and insights and wisdom that is born out of a healthy conversation where everybody gets to bring something to the table, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, I would say we've got to set those expectations for our team. Yeah. We've got to set the expectations. Guys, this is a conversation. So sometimes at the beginning, I'll say, hey, here's the problem we're facing. Here's a challenge we're facing. Here's a decision we have to make, whatever the case is. And then to say, okay, here's my expectation. We're going to talk about, we're going to process, we're going to give each other space to share. We're going to make sure we don't interrupt each other. So I'm setting the expectation. Mm-hmm. We're going to have different ideas. There's no bad idea. We're going to throw it all out. And at the end of the day, we're going to comb through it to find the best so that ultimately, maybe it is my decision to finally make. I want to make sure that we've harnessed, and I tell my teams this, this, we've harnessed the collective genius.
Yeah.
So that whatever decision I or we finally make is a decision that we feel like we've all participated in. But if we don't set those expectations, then people in the room will naturally default to whatever feels most comfortable for them. And it's usually not helpful.
Yeah. Talk to me about, because what this is making me curious more, like, how does this impact your team's buy-in in the decision process? The difference between feeling like a leader is making, just handing down the decision versus the type of engagement that you just described, where we're all in it together. What is the outcome for the team, even if the leader is ultimately making the decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're in many ways answering the question, right? Is when if we're not creating an environment where people feel like they really get to participate and share ideas and disagree with one another and disagree with the leader, right? Then people will never have ownership. I tell people all the time, my teams, the teams that I lead, do not feel that they generally have a very strong sense of ownership in everything that we're doing. And it's not because we always agree with each other. It's because they felt seen, they felt heard, and they felt valued. Because what my teams trust in me is that I'm not just there to make my own decision. I'm there to leverage their wisdom, insights, and experience and understanding, right? So that I have a better view of what's going on, so that I can leverage their ideas to make the right decision. And if they feel that they get to participate in that experience, they naturally will feel ownership, even if I make a decision that is diametrically opposed to what their suggestion was. But if they felt seen, heard, and valued, as long as I didn't cut them off, hey, thanks, but that's a bad idea, or I didn't shut people down, and I just said, hey, thank you for sharing that. I don't know if I agree with that, but I really appreciate there's some things you're saying that are really helpful. If I'm creating that environment, even if I make a decision that is contrary to what they would have preferred, people will generally have a far easier time getting on board, staying on board.
Yeah.
Because I think people generally understand if they're not the leader in the room, then ultimately they're not the one that's going to make the decision. And so they will respect it as long as they feel like they got to participate in that journey toward that decision.
Yeah. How do we do that in a way that doesn't feel trite? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we've all had that experience where there's leaders that ask our opinion, but you're like, this is a wasted exercise. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens when somebody shares an idea that internally as a leader, you're like, that really what felt like a dumb idea, or that felt like, that feels like off the reservation. Like, where the heck did you just go right now? Right. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with you. I think that is something as leaders that we have to be on watch for. So what I try to do as best I can is as people share ideas, I'm going to practice a lot of curiosity. Even if I don't like an idea or don't understand where they're trying to go with something, hey, help me understand that, unpack that more. I'll do what I call reflective listening. Let me tell you what I'm hearing you say. Are we on the same page? Am I understanding your idea or the solution you think is the best one in the situation? And then I'm going to give authentic affirmation. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for contributing that perspective. Hey, I really appreciate you digging down deep into that. Thank you for sharing that does not have to be followed up by, and that was a great idea.
Right. Yeah.
I can authentically affirm people. So grateful for that question. I'm so thankful that you brought that to our attention. I'm so grateful for that idea. I'm grateful for the idea does not mean I think it's a great idea. Those are very different.
So, helpful distinction.
I think it's authentic affirmation. And then I oftentimes, again, will rehearse the expectations I said at the beginning. All right, just as a reminder, thank you all for participating, for wrestling, for bringing the best of what you can to this space. This is something, even if I'm not sure where we're going to head, I'll say, I really appreciate it. And just as a reminder, I can't tell you how grateful I am that I get to wrestle through these things with you guys. And
Yeah.
whatever decision I make, I'm going to let you guys know, but please know that everything you guys contributed is shaping that decision. And now I need to make the best decision for what I think is the best interest of our company, our team, and the individuals involved. I just remind them that that's the expectation. That's what we're doing here, right? This is not about who gets the loudest voice and who is the smartest in the room. And, I'm very careful about protecting against that kind of environment. It's like, we are going to participate in this together. And whatever decision comes out of this, everybody contributed. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And immediately everyone goes, oh, crap. I'm glad because there's nothing worse than if you don't communicate that and the team doesn't feel that, then guess what happens? They're just like, why are we wasting our time? Why did I
Yeah.
even open my mouth? You don't care about what I'm saying. You're just going to do whatever you want anyway, which, trust me, we've run across that many a times.
Yeah. 100%. So, this is so helpful. I'm enjoying this, but let's go another layer deeper. Let's talk about some of our real stories that we have encountered lately with some of our clients.
Yeah, well, let me, actually, the last thing I was going to say before we transition into some stories, but it's a perfect segue, is, and I want to speak to those of us listening who lead a team and who have to facilitate these kinds of meetings. We have to learn to live in the tension between being present, being engaged, but being very intentional about how we throw our weight around.
Yeah.
So a few things to think about. Our body language matters, right? How we're sitting at the table, are our arms crossed? Are we actually looking at people while they're talking? Are we nodding our heads just as an acknowledgement that I'm hearing what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And our tone of voice matters, right? When we ask a question, we can ask a question with a tone of voice that says, hey, I want to understand more of what you're saying. Or we can say the same words in a tone of voice that says, I can't believe you just said that. Did you really want to say that out loud? Right? So tone of voice matters, and just to be thoughtful and aware of the tone of voice. And then the language, the words that we use, right? Being very careful to continually be inviting people into the conversation, affirming what people are sharing, asking curious questions, being careful not to suddenly, turn the ship in a hard left or right hand turn. That's really, really important, to the point where I often tell leaders, just get comfortable with sharing last. Your opinion matters, your perspective matters. But before you actually make statements, and you share your perspective or your interpretation of a challenge or a potential solution, ensure that everyone else has gotten to share first. Because that will, number one, train your team. Hey, you are going to participate. I do want to hear what you bring into the table. I do want to harness the collective genius.
Yep.
Number two, it keeps people from trying to pick up on where's the boss going so I can make sure I side with that and I'm on the winning team. Right? So oftentimes we recommend to leaders, hey, just get comfortable sharing last. It doesn't mean you don't share. You do share, but you share last. Share last. So here's that segues into a fun story. Oftentimes we talk about where leaders are struggling and feeling challenged in these different skills we're talking about, and then how they transform. I want to share an example of a meeting I was in where I was blown away by how a leader reflected what we're talking about.
I love that.
And I've seen it in two different contexts. One, I was this particular individual has a few different organizations that they're a part of leading and have ownership in. And the first one I remember seeing, I was with this individual. They were with the key executive team of this organization. And there were some significant challenges that they were facing in terms of personnel issues. And they were going to have to make some really big changes that would impact a lot of people, would impact the business. And so there's a lot at stake. And I remember sitting in on this meeting, as I often do with people we're working with, so that I get a front row seat to actually how things happen. And I was intrigued. He stepped in, he started the meeting and said, hey, this is what we're here to talk about. And So I would love to just, create some space here for everyone to contribute thoughts, questions, reflections, concerns, and so that we can solve this problem. And then for the next like 45 minutes, he never opened his mouth. People talk, people wrestle, people disagreed. It got a little heated at times. Then it kind of simmered down, and then people kept dialoguing. And the whole time, he's got the notepad in front of him where he's just kind of doodling, like literally doodling.
Oh my
Not,
God.
maybe he writes a word here and there. Maybe he draw. I mean, it was just literally chicken scratch, just writing. And about 45 minutes in, he interrupts, says, "Hey, I just want you all to know I'm super grateful for just all the different perspectives and the different interpretations of what we're dealing with and different ideas. And that we're all really kind of fighting for what's, the best way forward, so that we can really honor our core values." And he said, I'm so appreciative. I've heard some really good ideas here. And this is definitely going to help shape, I think, a good decision that will come out of this. And all right, I'll get back to you guys. That was it. Walked out of the room. I was like, what? And so later I said, "Hey, I'm curious." We had lunch together. I said, "I'm curious. That was an interesting experience for me. Help me understand. Clearly, you were very intentional about the way that you facilitated that meeting." I said, "Why? Tell me the rhyme and reason." He said, "Eric, I've been doing this for a lot of years. And what I've noticed is in my earlier years of leadership, I always thought that I had to come with the best ideas. I'm the leader. I'm responsible for solving the problem ultimately." And he said, "I didn't realize how much I just drained the oxygen out of the room. Anytime I said anything, if I tipped my hat to a particular perspective, it's like everybody shifted in that, no one wanted to be on the losing team." And he said, it took me a long time to realize how much weight my presence carries. And he said, "So I've really had to learn to create a space where I'm not inadvertently swaying the room in any direction." He said, "So that I'm really getting to the best of what everybody's bringing." He said, "Sometimes I have to step in and, if things get a little too heated, or there's a little bit of an argument that breaks out." He said, "But most of the time," he said, "what I find is if I just let everybody wrestle, I get the best of everything that everybody has. And now I can comb through that and really maybe I'll follow up with one or two people on the team to determine what's the best way forward." He said, "But now I've got the best of data points and information that I need." And I said, "Well, why do you chicken scratch on the piece of paper?" He said, "It gives me something to do. Otherwise, I'm about to jump out of my skin because I want to say something. I want to disagree with people. I want to argue with them. And he said that I know that just immediately steers the ship in a different direction. And I take over." I said, "Bro, that is so powerful. Like, that's something that I want to get better at and learn from." Then a month or two later, I sat in with him and another group a different executive team that he works with, and did the exact same thing. And this time, though, I just watched it unfold. I'm like, "Oh, this is so good." Except this time, he did interject at times. He said, "Oh, he showed a lot of curiosity, but he did say, 'Hey, I'm curious. My perspective is this,'" and he would share it. Tell me, guys, am I misunderstanding that? Am I seeing this wrong?" Even the fact that he would share his perspective or his interpretation or his thoughts, but he was very quick to follow up with, "Guys, push back. What am I missing? How am I not understanding this? Why do I see it differently to you?" Just those simple follow-up curious questions, giving people the permission in the room to disagree, to push back, to have a different opinion was so powerful.
Yeah. And that takes some serious discipline as a leader.
Yes, it does.
Wow.
I know firsthand it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah. Well, so last week you and I were out with another client, kind of leading a process that is designed to help the team harness their collective genius. And you helped me remember something in that space, which is this exact principle. So when we were doing the general sharing, where we were just kind of culling out all of what's good, what's hard, what's working, what's not working, everybody got a chance to share. But then came the time when we got to prioritize what seemed most significant. And you made sure to step in and say, leader, you're going last.
Yeah.
Because if you put up on there what you think is most significant, suddenly everybody's that's gonna skew all the results. And what do? We have them actually go up and put check marks next to the thing, right? It's a very it could be perceived as like a very vulnerable thing, right? I'm putting my X next to this thing that I think is the most important for our company to be paying attention to. But we made sure that everybody in the room did that before the leader. And what it produced was so much clarity. What we saw was there ultimately was so much alignment across the team in general, but we never would have had the confidence in that was actually the case if the leader had gone first.
100%. And what's interesting is I remember when I kind of reminded you about that, like, hey, make sure the leader shares last. And part of that was because earlier in the day, during one of the earlier sessions, I remember as soon as that leader would start sharing, the entire room, it was like, okay, that's the answer. That's the truth. That's the perspective. That's all that matters anymore. And I remember feeling when they would share, other people would share and people would jump in and disagree and challenge. If this leader shared, that never happened, almost never happened. And I realized, okay, we got to be careful to protect this room against the leader wasn't intentionally trying to pull everything in a certain direction. They wanted the collective genius, but didn't realize that by virtue of them just sharing in the beginning rather than at the end, that everybody said, okay, I guess we better get on board with that.
Yeah, that's right. And what's interesting about that is that leader, she's an amazing leader. She self-professed does not want to be like, doesn't like an environment where people look at her as quote unquote the boss. Yeah. And yet, right. So she's been very intentional about that. She's been so intentional in a lot of areas of her leadership. And despite that, this was still the case.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It illustrates that whether we like it or not, or realize it or not, or are aware of it or not, or are intentional of it or not, when we are the leader in the room, we carry a disproportionate weight of influence. And so that's not bad. We just need to be very intentional about how we leverage that weight and influence so that we don't rob ourselves and the team around us from what we're calling the benefit of the collective genius.
That's right. Well, why don't you lead us into takeaways, Eric?
We've been doing this in our most recent podcast. We're constantly trying to integrate more and more of the experience of what we do with our clients and coaching calls and experiences in this podcast. So please always feel free to drop us a note. Let us know what's helping in this podcast, what's not helpful, what would you want to see different, what are conversations that we need to be having so that we can serve you more effectively. But one thing we've been doing recently is just taking a moment to pause here at this point in the podcast to recognize we've talked about a lot of good ideas, a lot of good stories, a lot of good illustrations. There's so much good, but if you're like me, you're not going to remember all of this. And so what we want to do is invite you to just take a few moments of quiet. Whether you're driving, whether you're on a treadmill, skiing down the slopes of a beautiful snowy mountain, or stuck in rush hour traffic. We want to encourage you to pause and just simply ask this one question. Of all that I've heard today, what's one takeaway? What's the one thing I want to take with me from this podcast, put it in my pocket, that is going to empower me to be a better version of myself?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we would love for you to drop those takeaways into the comment section, hit us up on social media. We'd love to hear them. We get a lot of inspiration, and unless we take this time to actually process what's one thing we want to be intentional to put into practice, it's all just water under the bridge. So that being said, if this episode surfaced something for you and you want to go deeper, we'd love for you to join us on our upcoming masterclass. We do them every month. We just had one recently, but just head over to MPWRcoaching.com/masterclass, and you can see when the next one is coming up, or you can find that link in the show notes.
Love it. And as usual, if you found this episode helpful in any way, shape, or form, we want to encourage you to think about a friend, another leader in your world that would be encouraged, inspired, and empowered by listening into it. Share it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.